My stepsister revealed at my engagement party that my fiancé was the father of her 5-year-old son, but when the full truth came out, justice was brutal, and 2 men sued her for fraud. I'm 27 years old, I work in digital marketing, and I still can't believe my life has turned into this. 6 months ago, I was planning my wedding, choosing flowers and tasting cakes, and now I'm living alone in an apartment I don't even like, trying to rebuild my life from scratch. And everything, absolutely everything, exploded at my engagement party. Yeah, it sounds that dramatic, and believe me, it was worse living through it. I guess I should start at the beginning, or at least where all of this makes sense. My mom married my stepdad when I was like 14, something like that, and with him came Stephanie, his daughter. Stephanie is 5 years older than me, so when we met she was already like 19 and in that stage of thinking she knew everything. We were never close. You know, that kind of relationship where you share a house but not really your life. She married young, had Alexander when she was 27, divorced Eric a couple years later, and basically, we remained polite strangers at family gatherings. I went on with my life, finished college, got my job, met Cameron 3 years ago at an industry conference, and I thought finally everything was falling into place. Cameron was, or well, I thought he was, perfect for me. 30 years old, worked in software development. We laughed at the same silly things. We had compatible plans for the future. We got engaged last year on a coastal trip he planned completely, with sunset and the whole romantic thing. My mom cried when I told her. My stepdad invited us to dinner to celebrate. Even Stephanie sent a congratulations message, which honestly surprised me because she had never been especially warm toward me. Everything normal. Everything good. So we decided to throw an engagement party. Nothing too fancy, but something nice. Like 60 people at a pretty venue with a garden. We sent invitations 2 months in advance, including one for Stephanie and Alexander because, technically they're family. She responded that she couldn't come, that she had something with Alexander that weekend, which honestly didn't surprise or bother me. We weren't close. I didn't really expect her to come, and with one less person, it was one less plate to pay for. So all good. The party was on a Saturday in May, one of those perfect days where the weather cooperates and everything looks like Pinterest. We arrived early to help with the final details. Cameron looked handsome in his navy suit. I was wearing a white dress that had taken me weeks to find, and I was genuinely happy, you know? That silly happiness where you think nothing can go wrong. Guests started arriving. There was music, canapes, champagne, my friends taking 1,000 photos, the typical uncles making jokes about marriage. Everything was going perfect until, like 2 hours into it, I see Stephanie walking into the garden. She wasn't alone. She had Alexander by the hand, who was 5 years old at that point, and she was carrying a folder in her other hand. A manila folder, like the kind you use for important documents, and that immediately seemed weird to me. My mom saw her first and her face was total confusion, like, I thought you weren't coming. Stephanie walked straight toward where Cameron and I were standing, greeting people she knew, smiling like nothing. And I was standing there thinking, okay, this is awkward but well, she's family. She came last minute. How nice. I was so wrong. So wrong. Stephanie got to us, gave Alexander a hug and told him something like, stay here a moment, honey. Mommy needs to talk to these people. Cameron greeted her, like, hi, Stephanie. What a surprise you came. And she looked at him with a smile that now, looking back, was absolutely chilling. Then she opened the folder, took out some papers, and said loud enough for several nearby people to hear, I thought you should know that your fiancé is the father of my son before you marry him. I swear the world stopped. I can literally remember the sound of someone dropping a champagne glass on the grass. That's how silent everything got. I looked at her thinking she was crazy, or that it was a tasteless joke, but she extended the papers toward me and said, here are the paternity test results. Cameron is Alexander's biological father. I thought you deserved to know before making a mistake. And Cameron, who was next to me, went completely pale, like all the color draining from his face. And I immediately knew that some of this was true. People started murmuring. My mom appeared out of nowhere asking what was happening. Cameron was trying to say something, but the words weren't coming out, and I could only look at these papers in my hands that indeed said Cameron's last name, probability of paternity, 99.98%, and I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Stephanie was still standing there, with Alexander still holding her hand, looking confused at all the adults. And she added, "I'm sorry, Harper. I know this isn't ideal timing, but I thought you deserved to know the truth before marrying a liar." I don't remember exactly what happened next. Everything is kind of blurry. "I know," I yelled at Stephanie. "I know." Cameron tried to grab my arm and I pushed him away. I know my mom was trying to calm the situation while my stepdad was getting Stephanie out of the garden. I ended up locked in the venue bathroom crying while my friends tried to convince me to come out. And Cameron was outside the door saying, "Please, Harper, let me explain. It's not what you think." The party obviously ended. People left awkwardly and whispering, and I came out like half an hour later with my makeup running and the perfect dress completely wrinkled. We went home, well, to the apartment we shared, and there, Cameron told me everything. Yes, he had a one-night stand with Stephanie like 5.5 years ago, before he met me. It was at some party. They'd both been drinking. They ended up at her place. They never talked about it. Again, he swore, absolutely swore, that he didn't know anything about a child, that Stephanie had never told him, that he didn't even know her full last name or how to contact her after that night because it was literally a random hookup. And I wanted to believe him. Part of me really wanted to believe him. But there was a 5-year-old kid with paternity results that said otherwise. The next few days were absolute chaos. My mom called every 5 minutes trying to mediate. Stephanie sent messages saying she had only done the right thing, that Cameron had known all along and had chosen to ignore his son. Cameron insisted it was a lie, that he would never know about a child and not do anything about it, that Stephanie was making things up. I didn't know what to believe. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom because I couldn't even look at him. I took time off work because I couldn't concentrate on anything. And then Eric entered the equation. Eric, Stephanie's ex-husband, contacted me through Facebook after finding out what had happened at the party because apparently the news spread like wildfire. He told me he needed to talk to me, that there was information I should know. We met at a cafe. He looked tired and angry, and he told me that he had been paying child support for Alexander since the divorce, that Stephanie had always said Alexander was his son, that there was never any reason to doubt it. But now, with this revelation about Cameron, he wanted to get a paternity test too because something didn't add up. Eric got the test done, and it turns out he is not Alexander's biological father. So Stephanie had been collecting child support from him for years, like more than 3 years, for a child who wasn't even his. Eric immediately hired a lawyer and sued Stephanie for fraud, and that's when things got really ugly. My mom and stepdad were in shock, trying to defend Stephanie but also confused about how she had done something like this. I was still in my apartment trying to process that my engagement party had uncovered massive child support fraud. Cameron kept insisting on getting his own paternity test, saying maybe the papers Stephanie had shown at the party were fake, that this was all crazy. I told him yes, get the test, because I needed to know the truth once and for all. He went voluntarily, gave the samples. We waited 2 weeks that felt like 2 years. When the results came, they confirmed what Stephanie had said. Cameron was Alexander's biological father with 99.99% certainty. That night, I confronted him with everything. I told him, "Okay, you're the father, that's confirmed, but I need to know if you really didn't know anything or if you've been lying to me this whole time." He cried. Literal Cameron was crying, sitting on the couch, telling me he hadn't known, that Stephanie never told him anything, that if he had known, he would have done things differently. Part of me wanted to believe him. I had been with this man for 3 years. We were going to get married, but another part of me thought about that 5-year-old kid who had been existing all this time and Cameron never knew or never wanted to know. I started staying with my friend Jessica because I couldn't be in the apartment. My things were still there, but I slept on her couch, crying myself to sleep most nights. Cameron sent me messages all the time, called, asked us to talk, said we could get through this. I honestly didn't know what to do. My entire life had been turned upside down. Meanwhile, Eric's case against Stephanie was moving forward, and things with Alexander got horribly complicated. Child Protective Services got involved because basically, there was evidence that Stephanie had been committing fraud and lying about her son's paternity for years. They temporarily removed custody, and Alexander went to live with my mom and stepdad while they figured out what was going to happen. My mom called me crying, saying this was a disaster, that the poor kid was confused and scared, and I felt terrible, but also, what was I supposed to do? It wasn't my responsibility to fix Stephanie's mess. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, it came out that Stephanie had been collecting child support from another man too. Yes, another one. A guy named Patrick, who apparently had a short relationship with Stephanie when Alexander was a baby, and she had also told him he was the father. Patrick had been paying child support for like 2 years, thinking Alexander was his son. The investigation from Eric's case revealed all of this because basically Stephanie had been running a fraud scheme with multiple men. The court was involved, there were hearings, lawyers, everything was a media circus in our circle. My mom tried to defend Stephanie, saying she was going through a difficult time, that she made mistakes but was still her daughter. I tried to stay away from all of it, but it was impossible. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from relatives wanting to know what was happening, friends sending supportive messages, acquaintances being nosy. Cameron and I tried going to couples therapy. One last thing before making final decisions. We went to like 5 sessions with a therapist who seemed genuinely surprised by all the drama we brought. Cameron kept insisting he hadn't known anything, that he wanted us to work on the relationship, that we could get through this. I wanted to believe him. Part of me still loved him. But there was this kid, this real 5-year-old kid who was his son, and I didn't know how to process that. The therapist suggested we needed to rebuild trust, that Cameron needed to take responsibility for Alexander now that he knew, and I just thought, how did we get here? 2 months after the disastrous party, Stephanie showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she got the address or why she thought it was a good idea, but she knocked on the door on a Saturday morning when Cameron happened to be there, because we were picking up more of my things. I opened the door and there she was. She looked terrible. Skinny, deep, dark circles, and she started yelling at Cameron to stop lying, to admit that he had known about Alexander all along, that he had ghosted her when she told him she was pregnant. Cameron yelled back that it was a lie, that she had never told him anything. Stephanie pulled out her phone showing old messages, conversations from years ago that I had never seen. I stood there at the door while these two screamed at each other, and something in the way Cameron got defensive, in how his voice changed, made me realize there was more to this story. After Stephanie left, still yelling down the building hallway, I confronted Cameron again. I told him, I need you to tell me the absolute truth right now, because if I find out later that you lied to me, there's not going to be any going back. And he broke. Completely broke, sitting on the living room floor crying like a child, and he told me the truth. Turns out he did know. Not from the beginning, but he did know. The first time Stephanie came to a family dinner after Cameron and I started dating, I think it was like 6 months into our relationship, he recognized her. He realized that my stepsister was the girl from that night. He saw Alexander, who was like 2 and something at the time, and the math obviously added up. Stephanie had contacted him a few years before. When she found out she was pregnant, he had completely ghosted her, changed his number, basically disappeared because he panicked. And when he realized she was my stepsister, he decided to never say anything, hoping it would never come to light. I mean, this man I was going to marry had known for years that he had a son with my stepsister, had seen that kid at family gatherings, had eaten at the same table with him at Christmases and birthdays, and never said anything. He had watched me interact with Alexander, had heard Stephanie mention Eric as the father, and had simply kept his mouth shut, hoping his secret would never explode. I left. Right then. That same day, I called my friend Jessica, packed what I could in 2 big suitcases, and I left. Cameron begged me to stay, to forgive him, that he had been a coward but that he loved me. I just felt disgust, betrayal, and a deep sadness for everything we had that was now completely destroyed. I told him I didn't want to see him again, that the engagement was canceled, that this was over. The following months were legally complicated. I had put my name on the apartment lease. We had joint accounts. We had bought things together. I had to get a lawyer to undo all that financial mess. Meanwhile, the case against Stephanie moved forward. Eric won his lawsuit. The court ordered her to reimburse him all the fraudulent child support plus interest. Patrick also sued and won the same. Stephanie was convicted of fraud. They gave her community service and a year of probation because, technically, she had no criminal record, and the judge was merciful. As for Alexander, the poor kid who wasn't to blame for any of this, Patrick ended up with full custody. Turns out Patrick, the second defrauded man, had been acting as Alexander's father for 2 years, had developed a real bond with him, and the kid called him Dad. When the paternity tests revealed that Patrick wasn't the biological father either, he could have easily walked away, but he decided to stay. He fought for custody, proved he could provide a stable home, and the court granted it to him considering the child's best interest. Cameron has visitation rights because, well, biologically he's the father, but basically Patrick is the one raising Alexander now. My mom and stepdad were devastated by everything. The relationship with Stephanie is tense, obviously, because she basically committed multiple fraud and created this massive disaster. I try to keep my distance from that side of the family for now. It's too complicated and painful. It's been 6 months since the engagement party. I live alone in a small apartment that I'm still trying to make feel like home. I went back to work. My coworkers were kind and didn't ask too many questions. My friends take me out sometimes, trying to convince me to get back out there and meet new people, but honestly, I'm not ready yet. Cameron has sent me messages a few times, apologizing, saying he's in therapy, that he understands if I never forgive him. I read them but don't respond. I don't know what to tell him. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him for lying to me for years. Stephanie is doing her community service and working to pay restitution to Eric and Patrick. I heard from my mom that she has permission to see Alexander supervised a few times a month, but Patrick is the one who has custody. The kid is in therapy too, trying to process all this chaos that the adults in his life created. Sometimes I think about how my life was supposed to be. I should be married now, or at least preparing the wedding. Instead, I'm rebuilding from scratch, trying to trust people again, processing the betrayal of someone I thought I knew. I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a serious relationship again without that constant fear in the back of my mind, wondering what secrets they're hiding. Last week, I saw a young couple at the supermarket choosing a cake for what looked like their engagement, laughing and taking silly photos. I stood there with my shopping cart for one person thinking about how naive I was a year ago, how happy I was without knowing everything was a lie. I don't know if that feels like tragedy or relief yet. I guess it's a bit of both.